is the steward or trustee of the property now and has control of it, but it wishes to execute this plan with the community. So I'm excited about that because everything we do is collaborative, and there's nothing that we do that's more collaborative than this project because it incorporates the city, the state, initiatives from the federal government, outreach into the community, the town hall meetings, and essentially the co-creation of appropriate housing and adaptive reuse at the ridges. So today is another one of those co-creation opportunities because I'm with what I assume to be friends. I've spent my life working in affordable housing. There is nothing in the last 45 years in the way of legislation or initiatives that relate to affordable housing that I have not personally participated in. That's how long reaching it goes for me, all the way back to my operating the landlord tenant union at Miami University as an undergraduate. I received the bankers boxes and then handled it for 2 years and passed it along to another undergraduate. But as an attorney, I've worked in this field this entire time. Affordable housing is critically important to the community. I'm preaching to the choir here, but we really took it seriously, thinking about how could the ridges be reactivated in a way or evolve in a way that would be beneficial or take pressure off of the many challenges you are facing and trying to deal with in the community. So in our planning, we did a comprehensive market study that's available to all of you if you haven't seen it, but we looked at senior housing, other affordable housing, home ownership at various levels of home ownership, and all those components for the area and the region. We also looked deeply at the economic development impact of housing, including affordable housing, because we realized that in order to gain traction for affordable housing in communities, you really have to speak more broadly about the economic development benefits, both the opportunity for workforce housing to prevent the loss of labor resources, to make opportunities, especially in an environment where you're competing. Housing competition is with student housing, and it's so dramatic. It's probably more amplified here than any place in the state. The size of the university versus the size of the housing capacity within the community and the pressure on that is enormous. So I can see that it's underpinning a lot of the discussion on affordable housing. It's basically your competition from the mass of students and the economics of benefit for landlords in student housing. I'll put that broadly.
And approximately 70% of our residents are in rentals versus homeowners.
So that's another, that pretty much underscores how difficult it is to find affordable housing for home ownership and how you compete with pools of students who are, they're renting by the room, by the bed, and they have cosigners for every bed. So you see how the economics of that are dramatically skewed in favor of the student housers versus families and others who need affordable housing. So speaking about the ridges, we in looking at the housing, both ownership and rental, because we really think that, although we are experts at and have worked on 168 affordable housing projects utilizing the low-income housing tax credit in 30 states. So I've spent a lot of time on this subject, but I feel we over-rely on the low-income housing tax credit to our detriment. I'm old enough to remember what affordable housing and community development was like before 1986, when the tax law was changed and the low-income housing tax credit was produced. And my muscle memory is there are lots of ways to do affordable housing. We have to find those ways. Every way from, I think you mentioned your contractor, every way from thinking about construction techniques and skills, the technology related to utilizing the very many resources that are available that are adjunct to, connected to affordable housing, but not affordable housing funding itself. For example, many of the clean energy initiatives that come from the Inflation Reduction Act create a pathway for upgrades and improvements to affordable housing or the maintenance of affordable housing and the durability of that without really touching the low-income housing tax credit, which happens to comprise about 90% of the national initiative for what we call affordable housing. There's also the preservation of existing affordable housing that needs to be dealt with in a very careful and deliberate fashion. Developers focus on the low-income housing tax credit because they create building opportunities for themselves. they create development funding for themselves, and that's an opportunity to build a portfolio of valuable assets. So all of their energy and attention is focused on that, oftentimes leaving behind the many naturally occurring affordable housing or housing that could be modestly upgraded and maintained for affordability into the future. Your community is filled with those kind of opportunities. So I invite you to think about those things as well as the typical kind of run of low-income housing tax credits, about which I want to talk because the Ridges has a few of those opportunities. We looked at senior housing in buildings 2, 3, and 4, and I don't know how familiar you are with the Ridges site, but the big building that you look at when you come up to the campus, centered by the museum, and the women's dormitory, it's called the Batwing Building. That my sister's the architectural historian who worked on the framework. They call it the Batwing Building because it's got those step backs as you go. They're pretty much mirror images of each other. One side has been renovated as flex space. The Fine Arts Department is moving up there from OU. The other side has been empty for many years, 30 plus years. Is in very deteriorated condition. It's about 100,000 square feet. It's a beautiful building. We think it could be really appropriate senior housing. We look to do that with tax exempt bond financing, utilizing the low income housing tax credit and potentially the federal historic credit. When we first looked at this 3 years ago, and I know I'm talking fast, but I also have this information available in written form that I can share. But when we looked at it initially, there was a state historic credit that was appropriate for it as well. That no longer is appropriate because the legislature uncoupled it from the low-income housing tax credit. So you can't use the state historic credit along with the low-income housing tax credit. That's very unfortunate for Appalachia because you have a lot of historic fabric in these communities and you need all the tools at your disposal to try to lift them up. Maybe that'll be undone at some point, but right now it's prohibited and it's an important component.
Say that again, Joe, sorry. The historic tax credits have been uncoupled from the low income.
The state historic credits. So there are state historic credits, but you can't use them if you're using the federal low income housing tax credit. The federal historic credits can be used with the low income housing tax credit. And I know I'm in the weeds here, but the key element of this is every dollar that you get from an investor that you pay for with a credit instead of $1 is $1 reduced rent for a resident. So the idea is find as much equity as you can from these various programs to reduce the hard debt, the debt that has to be repaid on a monthly basis over a period of time. When you think about it, going back to my landlord-tenant union days of thinking about what comprises a rent, the owner wants to make their mortgage payment, they have to pay their operating expenses, and they want a return on their investment. Sometimes that's a lot of return, sometimes it's very little. But as you reduce the amount of debt incurred on the property, you reduce the amount of rent that has to be charged. The low-income housing tax credit basically creates a symmetry. The government says, I'll give you a benefit, a credit that you can use against your taxes, but you have to give me a rent restriction. And I don't want it for a year, I want it for 30 years or more. So the bargain is basically restrict your rents to match the income of your community, not nationally, and follow this path, and we'll give you these credits. These credits can be used to offset your construction costs or to reduce the amount that is hard debt. We're experts at putting together this capital stack, if you will, of all available funds that come together to create an opportunity. For the senior housing, the tax exempt program provides for something called income averaging. So you can actually, as you reach lower, to skew rents lower, you also have the opportunity to charge a little more rent as long as you stay within the affordable realm. And you may have been dealing with this on other projects, but the income averaging, we start at 30% AMI. So those are rents that are in the $400 range, including utilities. $400 or $500 is very low. You try to make your property attractive for those who have choice vouchers. If possible, we negotiate a project-based assistance for a portion of it to balance the load a little bit. And then you have higher rents, all within the affordable realm. We can do that with the senior housing. We also have anticipated a couple other pieces of housing to take pressure off in the community. One of them is artist live work units. So artists who are working oftentimes fit the profile of low income. Almost always fit the profile of low income residents. They are important contributors to the economic success of a community, and they're often displaced. Oftentimes the first groups that are displaced in areas where there is an uptick in value. So I'm from Columbus, Ohio. My peers who are my age cohort oftentimes have been, if they were artists, they've been displaced 3 or 4 times in the same, moving from one neighborhood to another, because people want to be around the creative folks. But then the rents run up, the area becomes gentrified, they become displaced. They're an economic development engine for the community, and you're a research university that mints artists and artisans. So the idea is make room for them in your community. They're an opportunity for advancement, and it really is aligned with the university's purpose. But let's make that affordable, and let's not do it in a way that is bait and switch. That is, they end up, it's affordable today because they're squatting in warehouse space or something. Then it becomes hot, and all of a sudden the rents go up, and professionals want to live there. The artists get pushed aside. So making that same kind of 30-year plus commitment to affordability is really important. We think there's 77 units of affordable artisan live work space available in the historic buildings at the Ridges. So we went building by building, looked at the assessment of 77 units. So if you're keeping count, that's 177 affordable housing units for rental at the Ridges.
177.
177.
Out of roughly.
Maybe 900 to 1,000 units total.
New construction and historic building.
Yeah, that's new construction and historic. Then in addition to that, there are affordable home ownership opportunities at the Ridges. So that's the repurposing of some of the buildings that could be home ownership units that would fit within that would fit into a 80% median income or less income level for homeowners. And there is the possibility of linking together with other programs, new construction that would be affordable to families that are 80% or 60 to 80% of median income. So I consider that affordable, but those are home ownership opportunities as well. And again, that's linking together in a public-private partnership structure, opportunities that exist under state and federal law. The specific program we're working with in affordable home ownership is the Welcome Home program, which you may be familiar with. Maybe another speaker has spoken about that, or you have been studying it. I actually have a meeting later today on this subject in Athens, but we're doing it in Sandusky, Ohio. So it's new construction. It's affordable. It's a write down. The building unit is $254,000. That's the cost of a 1,500 square foot home. And it is written down by $90,000 by the Welcome Home program. So that model actually would work really well. Sandusky's income level is very similar to the city of Athens, not Athens County. But that write down, that makes it affordable to somebody at 60 to 75% median income for adjusted for median family size for city of Athens. So those are programs that layering in these various programs, you can hit the objectives. Go ahead.
So is that similar? Or are you talking about the program with Federal Home Loan Bank? Or we're using similar words and it's not their program?
It's not their program, but the program fits. So the Federal Home Loan Bank Welcome Home program fits in conjunction.
Yeah, that's what I was trying, because it sounded
She's a
different.
finance person.
So it sounded different. So I was trying to figure that piece out.
So another, since you're a banker, another area of input, and again, thinking about the collaborative and co-creating. A local bank as a Federal Home Loan Bank member, I take it you're a member. The affordable housing program works for both the multifamily and for single family initiatives. If you're thinking ahead and you have good collaborative partners in the community, you can be going after those funds. In my experience, having done more than 50 of these affordable housing program grants for projects, is that small banks are treated very nicely in the system because they want to have greater participation. You have the big banks always coming forward, and the small banks that come forward get a little bit of special attention because they want the reach of the program to be broad among their members.
Yeah.
So there's an example of, your bank fitting really well into an affordable housing initiative. The things we're talking about are not limited to the Ridges. Obviously,
Right.
these tools can be used elsewhere in your community and should be used elsewhere in your community. I'm not suggesting that we have a monopoly on these ideas. It's just putting them out there and seeing how to, again, co-create it with other interested parties. Everybody at this table has a role to play. It's very clear to me. The Housing Authority has a massive role to play because I'm not telling you anything. The federal government is like, after 40 years of being asleep at the wheel, has decided you guys are important. So they're going to make some opportunities. The Fair Cloth, for instance, that gives you a chance to get new vouchers in. The ability to tie your project-based assistance together with bigger economic initiatives, to partner on those so that you have some strength as you move forward in your
This
opportunities.
project in Sandusky, are you working with Housing Authority there? Or do you know?
We're not working with the Housing Authority there. In that we are working with the city and the land bank and NeighborWorks. So those are that's the group. The Housing Authority we might work with the Housing Authority on another aspect. We have a school that we're adapting. That's another historic building that's being adapted for senior housing. They may participate in that. We are partnered with the Lucas Metropolitan Housing Authority on the repurpose of a historic building there, and we are their named development advisor on their other projects. So I love this work. And you can see what happens is the more you immerse yourself in it, the more resources you have to quickly bring to the table for action items when you're trying to solve a big problem. We're not researchers. I'm not a good researcher. I am going to summarize all this. Somebody's going to summarize the Saturday meeting, but it's like, I'm not really an academic. I'm not good at that. My focus is on execution. So I like to take good ideas that people are bringing forward and try to figure out how to solve problems.
So I think you mentioned the federal historic tax credits, right? I guess that would be a part of the Bridges
Yes.
development, is that right? And would that apply to, would any of the other infrastructure and the Ridges site be like qualified for the tax credits besides the, the kind of main Kirkbride building up on the hill? Like, are there other opportunities? So I lived and worked in Cincinnati and over the Rhine, which is like in a lot of ways built by the historic tax credit, both state and federal. And I didn't actually know that the state credit was uncoupled from the low income housing tax credit, which is interesting. But some of those projects are funded 50% by tax credits between state and federal, or close to it. And I think as that interfaces well with sustainability goals, and as far as reusing existing infrastructure, as well as capturing some of that kind of heritage and history that's on that site. And I think it's probably important to a lot of people, I think, to be able to preserve as much that as makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. So there's an enormous interest in the historic preservation aspect of this. So
We have a whole
very
commission.
well organized community around historic preservation, a very well organized community around the conservancy, and also the needs of new development to be modest and fit into the community. So yes, all those things. And Over the Rhine's a good example of that you're right. That would not have made sense. We did the master plan for the Cincinnati Metropolitan Housing Authority for the Laurel Homes, which is the adjacent public housing site that got redeveloped. None of that would have happened if it weren't for those public-private partnerships and bringing other dollars in. And that's my point. Like, the federal historic credit is uncapped. As much of it as you can use in your community, you can use. So with that in mind, I think, like in 1900, when a lot of historic buildings were built in Ohio or had been built, population of California and Ohio were the same. So here, 124 years later, who has the historic fabric? I mean, we're a tiny state with a massive load of historic fabric in our community, and nowhere more than in Appalachia, where the buildings were built and there was no pressure to demolish them, other than they return to nature that occurs sometimes. There really wasn't redevelopment pressure that took down Main Street in these small communities. So that, from my standpoint, from historic preservation, I think it's really important to take what we're talking about at the Ridges and make it a micro case study, that an individual building, how does that work with these tools? Not how does the whole site work, because there's only one 700-acre Ridges site in Appalachia, but there are lots and lots of buildings that are of various sizes. The smallest retail building potential at the site is 2,000 square feet. How many historic main streets have a 2,000 square foot building? If you have a model of that, what's it cost? And how do you put the capital stack together? How do we do it at the level that we're talking about? But how do we make that available for an individual owner user of space? And then who do they contact? A local artisan who knows something about historic preservation. Historic preservation, contractors make good money in historic preservation because it's a higher skill level.
Mhm.
It is also not, it can't be offshore. Historic preservation is a site-specific economic development activity. So I think all
This
those
is our
things,
economic development
well,
expert.
No,
And I-
it's so funny because I was just thinking, the Gloucester building project, you had to work closely with the historic preservation consultant, and I was like, another life, I'd go back and do what she does. It's fascinating, really interesting and critical work, and with all of the tax credits available, named a new job.
so that's the thing. So that's my update on the ridges, and it's also speaking a little bit about our philosophy or our approach toward the subject. And going back to my comment about co-creation, I take that very seriously. You know, in your community far more than I know, despite the fact I did market study and I have a lifetime of experience, it doesn't make that much difference. In your community, you know what the pressure points are. I have lots of opinions, I think you can imagine from my comments. I do, going all the way back to my undergraduate days, thinking about the landlord tenant situation and student housing. I have the idea that a very comprehensive code enforcement, along with the creation of appropriate student housing, would unlock affordable housing and home ownership in your community. But those two things have to fit together hand in glove so you don't disrupt the.
Let's talk about that another time.
Okay, but the ecosystem, and I think there's great promise for the housing that you have. It is being wasted right now by substandard landlords, as is true of absolutely every university town I've ever worked in. And as that is wasted, there's enormous profit in that, but you're held hostage because you don't want to lose the student housing. The university needs it. You don't want to completely disrupt your marketplace, but you want to go down a path of improving the property, improving the tax base, and making room for more folks in your community than just students and their parents. Just more opinions, but yeah.
I'm a little bit behind as far as like the Ridges project in general, but I understand there have been some presentations. What documentation is available? Like what information, other than drawings, master plans, like imagery presented, and is that information available?
It is.
Yeah.
So the university has a Ridges website where
Okay.
the framework is put forward. So we started with a framework that had been developed over many years with a lot of input, and it included an assessment of every building up there.
Okay.
So like a matrix system of assessment of what's there and what's not there, along with ideas that had been presented and evolved over time. We took that framework and then dove deeply into it and basically discounted some of the things, like some of the development opportunities that were presented, we didn't think made sense for the community because they were at war with other things, like the land lab, for instance, or the conservancy. It was like, in a way, it was just introducing sprawl. Well, sprawl can be done anywhere. I mean, it doesn't have to be done at the
We
ridges.
want our trails.
Exactly. So it's like when you're creating a conflict dynamic while you're trying to lift something up, it didn't make any sense at all. So being restrictive about it, there's no detached single family housing on lots at the ridges in the plan because it is essentially low density sprawl. You can't avoid it if you spread everything out. And people want their yards, but honestly, people also want conservancy district. So I would trade a conservancy area for a yard any day because the conservancy is natural and the yard has to be maintained. So you just think about people sometimes get yards just to separate themselves from other folks. Well, the
And there's
conservancy
ways to
district,
have community gardens or a little, garden plot that's right outside
Exactly.
the back door.
and that's a chance for social engagement, which we're informed, as we discussed on Saturday, with the social determinants of health, not just for seniors, for students, for young families with young children, young couples, it's faculty members, whoever's coming into the community. All those things are important. So the connectivity, the social engagement, nutrition, housing and financial security, all those things are contributors to a healthy environment. And at the ridges, we were actually following a path that is, it's already embedded in the bones of the ridges. That was the Kirkbride philosophy of natural light, of sustainability, of connection to art, nature, music, all those things. And here we're sitting in the midst of it is a museum, fine arts department, an outdoor curated space that the museum has participated in, along with all of the ridges, trails, the land lab, and the other activities. So we're really trying to use all of those things to inform our process.
Are there still homes planned for along Dairy Lane,
Yes,
single family?
yes. So they're attached, single family homes. They're along Dairy Lane. They're along the south side of the hill from the campus. That's another area. The brick lane that runs along the top of the park as you head over to the circle along that line. So those are new construction opportunities. There's an area off of Carriage Lane that it's not accessible by vehicle to Dairy Lane because of the summit, that student housing development. It will be accessible along the easement that was formed for there'll be a trail that walks through, but not by vehicle. You'll have to get it off of Carriage Lane, but there's good developable land there. It's a modest amount of it. The rest of it is dedicated to conservation.
Right.
So there's some multiple new construction opportunities that would be built out over time. And we size those capacity based on sewer and water availability, so those sized appropriately. And then the purpose of the new community authority is to make it possible for investment to be made in infrastructure ongoing to upgrade the site. Because the site, I mean, it had 1,900 people living in it in 1900.
Yeah.
There was a lot, and it had 2,000 staff people too. There's a lot of people were up there, but they didn't use as much electricity as we use today. They didn't use as much water and sewer as we use today. So, you have to think about that infrastructure.
So you said it's off of Carriage Lane, which is, where Carriage Hill is, was called Carriage Hill.
Yeah.
So there's that. But then on the other side, it looks like there could be an entrance from Blackburn Road, which is, so you go down Dairy Lane and then you turn left. Away from the dairy barn. That's Blackburn. So it would be right across there. The reason I ask is a friend lives right there.
A friend lives there?
Yes, she was there Saturday. So
She was?
Yes.
So as I understood it from the city and the university, there was reluctance to provide an easement that would permit a road connecting that. But it might be that person or some neighbor that is not wanting that, but it's very interesting
No,
because.
she's fine with it, by the way.
Okay, well, I think I need you as an emissary, some ambassador to say this is good for the community and probably good for her as
Well, it
well.
would be outside the city, which might be an issue. Anyway.
So I don't think that would be a problem if it's outside the city, but if there's a way to connect to it, looking at the topography, yes, there's a way.
Because
to
it
do
would be weird to have that many people exiting from one
Yeah.
That's
road.
what I was thinking.
That
It's like,
doesn't
what
seem
is the
safe.
fucking- Yeah.
I mean, that's part of the reason I asked.
So that the university reserved access when it sold the summit site and provided an easement. They reserved a right to access it, so a second entrance from that summit. There's
On the other side.
but I'm questioning whether that would
On
end
the
up
Dairy
being
Lane side.
on the Dairy Lane side. So where the summit entrance
Yeah.
is, that same entrance, the university reserved a right to use that to get up into their site. So it was a trade-off of, I forget what it was, controlled fill. They needed something and they got something. But that something they got was not recorded as an easement, as a contract, and the property has since changed hands. So there would be a question of
Interesting.
enforceability. There'd be enforceability against the seller, but
Yeah.
I don't know what was disclosed.
Mm.
And we're not really looking to lead off with a fight. So it's like, that's another thing, but maybe
get
that
it.
other approach, Blackburn, might be interesting. And it definitely would make the
It's right
site more
there.
worthwhile.
And there
So,
aren't that many houses on Dairy Lane. I mean, it's it's a lane, right?
Oh, yeah.
So,
There's hardly anything, yeah.
but the infrastructure is all in place now. Well,
in
it's almost
theory,
done on Dairy
Yeah.
that's an
Lane.
ongoing
Yeah.
battle.
Yeah.
So we're also working with the 317 board So you're thinking about being a more inclusive community and how you respect the site. We asked the university and they have reserved space for additional housing for the 317 board adjacent to their existing facility in the hope that they would have funding in the future for
Oh,
that. So we're going
that's
to help
supportive
them.
housing.
Yes, it is.
Oh, I
Permanent
didn't think you
supportive
had
housing.
anything, I didn't think you had any part of that. I thought that was a completely separate project.
It's not because they asked for our help and we said we'd help them. It's their
Oh,
property. We're
okay.
development advisory service for them. And so that's another thing we do. I mean,
Okay, I didn't know that was part of the project.
yeah, it's not part of our project so much. It is complementing something
Yeah,
that they're doing.
they
So
need to do.
they needed that
That's
land.
important for you all to know.
Yeah, so it's again, thinking about all the tools in the toolbox and how to make those available to our friends and neighbors.
So we need to do a couple other things before we're done here. So is there
You want to
anything
get
else?
rid of me?
No, we're delighted to have you, but
Do you have his card? I need to take a picture. I would like
Yeah.
his contact.
we will provide his contact
Okay,
information,
okay.
no problem. And make sure that you have the website. So that will be there.
So
And
the university has a Ridges website, which has a lot of this. We have a website we're seeking approval from Ohio University to open up. The sensitivity is it's the Ridges. We don't own it today. It's going through that controlling board. We don't want to
Right.
offend anybody, but we also want to share information. We're committed with the Voinovich School. Everything we're talking about doing, like all of the pro formas, the economics, the due diligence, we're going to put all that online at Voinovich so the Mayor's Partnership for Progress and others can use this. There's way more work product than I can use in my lifetime. It's like, I'm happy to share anything I can.
And I think that it would be appropriate, if it's okay with you, that we could have the results of Saturday's focus groups and whatnot
Sure.
available on our affordable housing site, perhaps.
As well as, I mean, anything you want to link.
Right.
I haven't been to your site, but anything you want to link that we're talking about that relates to this, I'm happy to share.
Yeah. Well, we'll be in touch.
All right.
So
Thank you very much for
keep
your
that
time
information.
today. I hope I didn't overstay my welcome.
No, you did
I am
great.
chatty about this stuff.
No, you're great. We really appreciate it. I'm sure we'll have questions as things roll out further.
Yeah,
But,
and we can do that on an informal basis. My cell phone number is on my card. So you
Yeah.
can call, text, email, I'll get back to you.
Thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
down. I really appreciate it.
Good seeing you all.
And I'll be sending you the notes probably tomorrow because I'm still waiting for someone who's got sick and forgot. Anyway,
Okay,
so
thank
we'll-
you.
Thank you. And I have some additional notes which I mentioned.
I'm on a panel with him. Okay. Coming up here. So you know Ralph? Oh, yeah. Okay.
I call her up for a little question.
So if you don't mind, I'm gonna call you about the Section 8.
Yeah, one of the things that came up, I think, is that Joe mentioned, because we talked about this, I think, last time, is that some of these contractors who got the tax credit
Mhm.
are sort of seemingly cheating after a year.
Well, they seem to be raising rents.
Yeah, in a way that may be inappropriate.
It's still under FMR, but it's
Thank you.
So
a
Bye-bye.
little bit
make-
bonded.
Yeah, we want to make sure that they are following the rules. I mean, if
Yeah.
it's 30 years, it's 30 years.
Yeah.
You know, so, okay, anyway, we didn't establish quorum because I really wanted to get going, but we obviously do have quorum, so I think we can check that off our list. And we didn't get the minutes from last time.
I sent
Until
them
now,
to you this
yeah,
morning.
yeah.
Do you want me to send them out to everybody?
Yeah, if you could do that, I think that would be helpful. I probably should have done it, but I was racing to get done to get here,
I
so I
don't know if
apologize.
we approved the minutes from the past.
Yeah, I think we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm gonna, well, I think that's what you're saying, like, board members haven't had a chance, or commission members
Yeah.
haven't had a chance to read through them.
Right,
But that was for, I mean, April, and I think March also. we haven't done.
well, we're trying to get it together here,
We're
so.
glad you're here.
Yeah, see, we need people who are detail oriented and do these things. What do you want to do about that? Because I mean, officially, we should be voting on our minutes and we haven't because whatever, trying to get it together. So why don't we, how about this? Get all the minutes on that site and whatnot, and then we can, everybody, I'll send out the link to that, make sure everybody's got it. And then we'll do a bunch of them all at one time next month. And as you know, we're meeting every Wednesday or Tuesday,
Third.
third.
Tuesday.
So is everybody okay with the third Tuesday? That would be June 18th, right?
I might be in Utah that time. We're still figuring out when we're going in June.
Okay. Anybody else?
I am not free that day. I'm
You're not
sorry.
free that
I
day?
haven't even looked, sorry, I'm still sending these minutes out.
Yeah, because as we all know, if you have a set time every month,
Yeah,
people set that aside then, and we're more likely to have a
I think
quorum.
summer's just gonna be hard.
Yeah, summer's gonna be hard. We may skip July altogether because we have a
Yeah,
recess.
that's the July meeting. Sure.
Yeah.
June could be-
So let's, Molly, how about you in June?
Okay, so June, what was the date, sir? 18.
18.
We have some people who are not here, and they might be available in June, right?
Yeah, well, you know,
Just pick a-
we can't,
Yeah, I'm good.
okay, good, because also I think, and I, maybe, you know, I think one or two of you are, your term is up and we can have you on again, but we have to check with city council and have you approved.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so I'll check on that.
Went all day work retreat that day, so I know that I won't be available on the 18th, but you let me know. You said we can't record these, like even just. to
Well, we
follow up?
can,
Okay,
we
just
can,
so that way I'm in the loop of what you all. talked
Yes,
about. That would
you
be
can't
awesome.
chat, we can't make any
Yeah.
decisions if
Okay.
you, with those
Yeah.
people who are online.
If you share that.
But I think we got a little bit screwed up because the cord, and I think Zach was observing,